Hey there everyone, welcome to another video. This is a really special video and a little bit different from the other ones that we've made before. You're not going to see so much of us working on site as much as in our warehouse here in Surrey, and then also the final install at the Pacific Center Holt Renfrew. I wasn't aware of this, but if you're rich and famous, there is a VIP suite at the top of the Holt Renfrew area there in the mall. Has its own little elevator, beautiful little suite. Unfortunately, the decor wasn't, specific to David Yurman. So they actually hired a production company, Eclipse Production Design. They do big high-end, concerts and sound stages and whatever you want, pretty much. So they then hired another team and they produced these special mock-ups, as you can see, out of MDF board. And they perfectly fit over the entire area of the VIP suite and covered the existing walls, which are just regular drywall. And this allowed us to actually produce a system of panels. You can see there's actually joints between each panel. They're only about 3 or 4 feet wide. And there's a joint right there you can see. And so what happens is we're actually going to plaster over top of all the joints. They're going to get carefully cut, broken apart, brought on site after they were all wrapped and packaged up. And then those panels are all put back together. And then we came in at the end of the video and patched up those tiny little joints to try to make it as seamless as possible. The other mistake you might make on a project like this is thinking to do it just panel by panel. And unfortunately with the spatulata, you're going to see that the hand movements don't transfer across each panel. So when you put it all together, it will actually just look like a bunch of different random panels rather than a uniform wall. So what you've seen so far in this video is you saw the rough MDF there that came, set everything up. We then coated everything in Benjamin Moore Fresh Start Primer. Again, MDF or any type of wood will bleed those tannins through your plaster, so you want to make sure you use the Benjamin Moore Fresh Start 2 coats. Then as you saw Kevin going around with the putty, we filled and fixed up any of the larger nail holes and, any little staple marks, different things like that that were missed in the original production. You're also going to see a bunch of plinths and panels and wiring. They were made by Whistler Contracting. You'll see they're tagged a lot in our posts. They work with our products, but they also do contracting work as well. So there is a multitude of people here building different plinths, platforms, some people building these, and then we were expected to plaster all of them in our warehouse and then ship them off to the specific site and then finish everything there. So you just saw the final sanding of the walls, then we applied the quartz primer. When we're using the Grisello spatulata product now, we do like to water that quartz primer down, sometimes at least 30%, maybe even a little bit more. And this just helps, and you want to use a 10 mil microfiber roller. It helps keep the orange peel down, and you just want a little bit of tooth and aggregate. You don't want to have it so thick that it starts to kind of chatter through the plaster. It will sag a little bit on the Benjamin Moore Fresh Start, so you don't need very much. Make sure you've mixed your pail up really well and got all the sediment off the bottom. And just come back after a few minutes and just dry roll back over those walls and make sure there's no drips or anything. Make sure it's a really good quartz primer coat. This color is Benjamin Moore Wild Mushroom. Quite a beautiful color. When it's all done, you'll see how it comes together. And then we're using our plastic EIFS trowels there, and again those large Bianca ProFlex trowels that we do love to use now for our first coats of the spatulata. You'll see us move towards those Pavon small anima trowels after, which are beautiful for our spatulata, or really any Grisello product in the world. Now you're going for minimal amounts of lines. You're not going to want to go too thick or too thin. If you go really thin and scrape it on, you're kind of just going to see the primer through it. And if you go too thick, you do run the risk of it cracking as there's no aggregate at all. The plinths haven't arrived yet. They were coming down from Whistler in a couple more days, but we got a head start on these. You'll also see soon that we're going to be working on MDF baseboards as well that cap the bottom and the top of these. And on site we had to fill all of the little holes and silicone and everything. You'll see that process, how it comes together. Now after the first coat's dried overnight, we come back, and keep in mind these are not like perfectly shaped panels. A couple of the walls were, curving a little bit. There's also like the joints that, although they're well in plane, there is still some of the joint to fill, so there's little bits of, lines and thicker spots. They're not perfect level 5 drywall. So we went through and we decided to give everything a sand. You see us sanding a lot in our videos for first coat, usually only finer products. Concrete Look fine, Intonakino fine, the Grisello fine, or the Grisello spatulata products. You want to make sure with your thinner coats that you always reduce the amount of lines and ridges in that base coat before you proceed onto your second layers. This just helps, and sometimes you'll see as well, we'll leave all the lines and ridges and let them rip through, because that is also a kind of an old world effect and looks very beautiful as well. So there you can see Kevin is doing the sanding and checking over everything, and then Raman's coming behind with a white microfiber rag, and he's actually dusting those walls down. We used a lot of rags to get all that dust off. If you leave a lot of the powder and dust, you do run the risk of having the spatulata potentially delaminate in a spot or just not bonding as well. It's very, very rare to have any peeling or issues with our products when you burnish them, but you never want to leave too much dust on there and just run that higher risk of having a potential issue on a high-end job. So here the boys are starting to do the second coat. This was just a 2-coat system. The spatulata looks really beautiful in 2 layers. It's going to be a little bit more gregarious, a little bit larger movements. And then if you move into that 3rd layer, you start to tighten it up and it looks more like a uniform sheet of marble, and it also gets much more shiny. But for this particular install, there was really no need or ability to get that amount of shine, specifically because these were wanting to tip over if you put too much weight on them. So there was only so much that we could do with them in the current circumstance. Here's all the plinths. I think there is 12 of a normal size and 2 larger, and then you see the base there as well, and there's like a bunch of wires and wiring so that they could hook up all of their little jewelry lights into the top of these plinths. We had to be very careful not to infill those holes on the top of the MDF so that the lights would fit in nicely. Again, 2 coats of Fresh Start, 1 coat of the quartz primer, watered down 30%, 50%, depending on your taste and how it's applying that day. Also depends on your weather, humidity, how hot it is as well, lots of different factors to consider. Now you see these guys are both right-handed, so they're starting working left to right. For me, I'm left-handed, so I'd start on the right-hand corner and then work down the other way. At the top of these, you have to be very gentle and careful not to tip it over. There is kind of an A-frame set up behind, however they still were a little bit wobbly. The color of these plinths, this is our Grisello spatulata product as well. And this was a Benjamin Moore color as well. I believe it's called Moonlight White. Just a very nice off-white color. Now the walls you'll see later were actually left in their natural state. This was only set up for about 3 days, I believe. Just a short kind of pop-up for David Yurman. And so the walls were left in their original state. We didn't wax them, we didn't put any sealer. And then the plinths had a matte sealer put on them, as you've seen in some of the other videos where we prime with the Polyseal Low Sheen, diluted 1:1, 1 coat of Polyseal, and then that final matte sealer. Now there was a lot of lengths of baseboard here. 30, 40 pieces. I can't remember, maybe even 50. There was a lot. And anytime things are very small, they actually take much, much longer to do. So keep in mind if you're ever asked to do a project like this, or millwork, or small items that are, kitchen cabinets, things like that, you always want to charge significantly more. So if you're charging $15 a square foot for a wall, then you'd probably want to charge $45 or even $60 a square foot. Or I know a lot of people even get into the $100 a square foot, because all the little pieces, the little crevices, the little edges, you can do a 100 square foot wall in the time it takes to do one little piece of baseboard. The other issue with the baseboards as well is the edges, top and bottom, kind of curl just enough so that when you're troweling over it, it doesn't fully cover the quartz primer. And you'll see I'm going to use my finger to gently hide that before I start the burnishing process. You can also see too, I'm working with very, very small amounts of product. The spatulata does spread very long, and even if you're doing a large wall, you need very small amounts on your trowel. Just like maybe a teaspoon of product, maybe in 2 teaspoons on there is enough to do your little baseboard. Now you're going to want to let that set up just a little bit. You're going to see me start to hone that edge and try to cover up a little bit of that white there before I start the burnishing. And you're going to want to let the spatulata set up until it's a little bit more clay-like, 30 seconds, a minute, a couple minutes before you start that burnishing. Don't allow it to get completely dry before you burnish, else you're not going to get the same amount of shine and color movement. If it's really wet, it's also not going to shine and you could damage the product. So you just have to find that sweet spot with it, and that just takes time and understanding your product and also the environment that you're working in. Now, because that piece is so small, if I turn that trowel on the side and run it across the face, it's going to again start to open up and damage that edge that I just worked on. So you're going to want to use the nose of the trowel so that you have a lot more control and you can just run it up and down that baseboard, and that's how you're going to produce your final burnished finish. You can see the shine starting to come out already there. Now we're moving on to these beautiful plinths, which you'll see, I think you already saw some of the photos there at the start. They looked really, really nice in the space, and I like the contrast between the wild mushroom and this lighter color. And I think the gold jewelry would have looked really beautiful over the nice white as well. Again, these plinths took a long time. They don't look like a lot of space, but when you start adding up, each piece and spreading it out, 14 plinths. If you're quoting this, you think, oh, it's not so much work, but it's a lot of work. And like I said, anytime you're dealing with a lot of edges and 90 degrees, you always want to charge more because it's going to take, 3 or 4 times longer than you think. This was also a challenge. Although the warehouse is large, you've got a lot of the wild mushroom around the area, and then you're trying to do your white plinths. It's also hard to keep them all off the ground and not having contaminations, so it was definitely a challenging project to pull all this off. And I didn't get video of the packaging, but it took about 6 hours for the company to come and perfectly package everything. They wrapped it all in plastic and blankets, and then they actually had to carry all this stuff up, I think 3 flights of stairs without damaging it to get it up into the unit. So quite the process for this pop-up. There's a lot of effort on everyone's part to produce this beautiful space. Because there's so many edges, you always have to do a lot of sanding the externals, sanding the bottoms, making sure there's no buildup, keeping everything clean and tidy, vacuuming in between. Anytime you're dealing with white colors, you always have to worry about cross-contamination and ensuring that you have a very clean, open space. So the plinths are all finished. The walls are now finished as well, and Kevin's using his flashlight just on his camera there because that is actually 2 pieces of wood there, and there's many joints all around our space, so we had to carefully cut these joints so that when they come and break the walls apart to move them into the VIP unit downtown, that plaster wasn't kind of fracturing and breaking and causing rough edges, or worse, even like pulling a piece off from the quartz primer. So we carefully cut every single joint so that they came apart nicely, and then you're going to see how we reform those joints on site after to create a relatively seamless look. So here we are at David Yurman now at the Pacific Center. They put all the baseboards on, so there were tiny little brad nail holes. All those tapes are running along 2 pieces along the break joints of all the walls that we needed to fill in to kind of make it more seamless to the eye. And you're going to see how we did that as well. Essentially, you just had to tape off less than maybe 1/2 mil on each side of that cut joint, and then very carefully fill that joint with plaster, allow it to dry, do one more fill, burnish it, give it a light little sand, and then take off the tape. And you can see there how shiny these walls are too, and in the proper lighting. We did give them a good kind of strong burnish. And the space itself was very stunning, and they put all their beautiful paintings and lots of little different, flowers and bouquets and things in. It transformed kind of a very regular VIP space into something much more special. There you can see the wet plaster on the joint there, and you're going to see we're just lightly filling that in so that we're not having these open kind of cut joints, which would really ruin the aesthetic. So that looks a little bit darker there because it's still wet, but as that dries, it's going to lighten up, and a little bit of light sanding, and you won't be able to really even see it. If you really stare at it from a few feet away and you know they're there, you're going to definitely be able to see them. But the general, public passerby from 8 or 10 feet away, you're going to have that full feeling of a giant plaster wall. And like I said, the trick here is that we actually plastered over the joints so that when they're put together, you don't see just panels put together. You actually see the movement of the plaster moving right across the panels so that the eye doesn't catch the fact that they're actually broken up. So here's us on the day before their opening, working away, getting everything ready. This is before they had time to really stage up the space into the final photos that you saw. We also had a color match silicone. You'll see us at the end. We had to silicone all the joints. We had to fill all of the baseboard and the molding joints. We also did a lot of touch-ups on the plinths, fixing any damage from the moving, resealing anything, and checking for a little bit more glossy areas, as the polyseal is more glossy than the matte. And then, although we have good lighting in our warehouse, it's not nearly the same as here with the windows, so we're able to catch any little areas that were still shiny and matte them down again. There was a lot of attention to detail paid to this. It was an expensive project, and obviously you have to charge for your time for these. But again, the outcome was very stunning, I think, and well worth everyone's effort. Those are those little lights that, see, if you didn't pay attention and had those holes filled, then the electrician would have been struggling to get those in at the end of the day there before they were starting. Now everything's done, the joints are finished, all the little pinholes and brad nail joints are all filled up, and the last thing to do was to just put the silicone on and make sure that that final little detail was there. Doing the silicone was a little challenging because the walls were completely unsealed, so if you put too much silicone, the oils and the silicone would actually stain the plaster, so I had to be extremely careful to put just the right amount on and just spread it where I wanted and not allow it to basically touch any of the plaster outside of that area, else I'd get like a little dark spot. So that's another thing to take note of as well, all these little details that come up on these jobs. And there's the beautiful final finish. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to our channel. We've got lots more videos coming up for you.